The Allies had failed in a series of attacks on bridgeheads to secure a foothold over the Rhine River, dashing their hopes of winning the war by Christmas of 1944. But improved springtime weather encouraged commanders to get on with ground hostilities. We overran the Rhineland. Bridgehead at Remagen. The Ludendorff Bridge across the Rhine River at Remagen, Germany, was captured by the Allies intact on March 7, 1945 as the Germans tried to blow up the bridge, a stroke of luck. The bridgehead at Remagen was the Germans' last line of natural defense to hold up the Western Allies' advance and our ground forces' chance for the first major crossing of the Rhine. Several German officers were court-martialed and punished by the German army for failing to destroy the bridge. Securing this bridge allowed the Allies to envelop the Ruhr area, the main German industrial complex along the Ruhr River, a tributary of the Rhine on the Rhine's east side. Our forces felt a great urgency to protect that bridge. The bridgehead at Remagen required Allied air cover around the clock. It was the 36th Group's turn at bat when the powers above spotted a large number of German aircraft being moved under cover of darkness to within striking distance of the bridge, just 30 miles east of Remagen. They were parked under trees with camouflaging. On March 14, I was in a flight of 8 P-47s circling a small German grass airfield deep in Germany, just south of Kassel, in the early morning hours when the sun rose enough to start shooting. Because our targets were hidden and camouflaged, we had to poke for them. When the first 2 or 3 airplanes blew up, our formation developed characteristics of a school of sharks in a feeding frenzy with no visible resistance. For our own safety, we had to back out, line up, and take turns attacking. We ran out of ammunition and left numerous smoke columns in the still, gray dawn. The 404th Fighter Group took over after us. By the time we headed home, 9 TAC had a big day. The events were published in the 9th Air Force in World War II by Ken C. Rust. 9 TAC had proved it could defend the bridge on the 13th of March 1945, and the next morning, its 36th and 404th Fighter Groups showed it could also prevent major attacks in one of the outstanding achievements of the period. The missions by the 36th discovered more than 50 enemy aircraft, mostly Ju-87s, Stuka dive bombers, bombed up and waiting to take off for Remagen at the well-hidden Lippe Airdrome. They, the 36th, attacked them. With 4,500-pound bombs, 12 rockets and numerous strafing passes. When their P-47s left, the airfield was spouting smoke from numerous places, and 23 Ju-87s and 1 Mi-109 Messerschmitt fighter plane were destroyed and 20 were damaged. Next came 12 P-47s from the 404th, which bombed and strafed other aircraft at the base. Their attack lasted 15 minutes, destroying 21 aircraft, mostly Ju-87s, and damaging 19, but 2 Thunderbolts, P-47s. Mushed together and exploded in midair, Aero Publishers, 1970. The Stuka was a famed but by then obsolete 1939 German dive bomber. It had a fixed landing gear and could drop bombs with pickle barrel accuracy but, likely, couldn't win a dogfight with a fleecy cloud. Now on the other hand, the Messerschmitt was a dogfighter, not a bomber, not a fighter bomber. One might wonder if the 36th Group's 8 P-47s had come on the scene 1/2 hour later and met the Messerschmitts in the air. Would we have become 8 instant war heroes? Nope. By this time, my 36th Group had highly skilled combat pilots, and had proved it the day before, on March 13th. As reported, 11 P-47s from the 53rd Squadron over the Bonn-Siegen-Attendorn area found 15 to 20 Messerschmitts acting as top cover for FW-190s, the versatile Focke-Wulf fighter/fighter-bomber/ground attack aircraft, at 10,000 feet. The Fokkers were ready to dive bomb the area. Our pilots attacked from 17,000 feet, so the Fokkers jettisoned their bombs and participated in a wide-ranging dogfight. The Germans lost 7 Messerschmitts for no loss or damage to the P-47s, 36th Fighter Group Historical Data, March 1945. We cleaned up on the 13th and the 14th of March. The 36th Group flew many missions during this time, and several of my pilots were in dogfights with the enemy. But for myself, I never faced an enemy plane in the air during World War II. From 9 TAC, MSG CNNO. 17, 2, 36th FTRGP, through General Carl A. Tui, Spatz, Commander, U.S. Strategic Air Forces in Europe, USAF. Quote, note your message dated March 24 outlines results, dated March 26 from General Hap Arnold, achieved during period March 16 to 22 March. Results are source of great satisfaction to all. Such smashing aerial attacks coordinated with relentless ground pressure can only result in complete victory. Please pass my personal commendation. Unquote, you deserve every bit of it. Signed, Quesada. Operation Varsity. The Germans put up a fight after our success at the Remagen bridgehead, so our army dug in and regrouped. The British forces to the north pushed through the Low Countries. Then on the morning of March 24, more than 16,000 British and American paratroopers supported by several thousand aircraft executed Operation Varsity, the last large-scale, and most successful, airborne operation of the war and the largest single-lift airborne op in the war. Commanded by British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, its objective was to help the surface river offensive troops secure a foothold across the Rhine. He dropped the British 6th Airborne and 2 divisions of the American 18 Airborne Corps on the east bank of the Rhine, a short distance behind the German lines to ensure the paratroopers could link up with Allied ground forces quickly. Among the thousands of aircraft in the operation, swarming like bees in the sky, the entire 36th Group flew cover for Goonie birds, C-47s, with bellies full of paratroopers from Brussels, Belgium, and into Germany across the Rhine. On that day, from my cockpit, I saw them all in one clear, peaceful sky, unopposed. We rarely flew missions at group strength, usually only at squadron strength, rotating squadrons. Laying on such a mission in Operation Varsity took planning, briefings, and time. In this mission, our operations in the air were monitored and controlled by TAC. Friendly fire incident. The final line of the 36th Group historical data for March 1945 said, on April 5, 1945, LT Col. Slayden was replaced as Group Commander, a little more than a month before the war in Europe ended. I was relieved from command because, in the late afternoon of March 24, one of my pilots most unfortunately shot down a British Mosquito, a small Allied twin-engine plane mistaken several times for a Messerschmitt during the war. I had returned to base after a peace-seeking mission dropping surrender leaflets over pockets of resistance deep in the Rhineland to find my headquarters in an uproar. The staff and pilots involved in the friendly fire incident, including 2 of the 8 P-51 fighter pilots escorting the Mosquito, were writing their statements of what happened. The American P-51 was a British-made, long-range escort fighter that usually operated at high altitudes. On the afternoon of March 24, my 23rd Fighter Squadron, 25 P-47s, was protecting a formation of U.S. bombers, B-26 Marauders of the 9 Bombardment Division, at approximately 17,000 feet on Mission X-51, one in the vicinity of Kalbe, Germany, 75 miles inside German lines east of the front at the Rhine River. The bombers consisted of 3 boxes of 6 planes and 1 box of 7 planes, 50 bombers and fighters in the sky. My group intelligence officer, S2, briefed the orders for the mission to the P-47 pilots the day before with no mention of other aircraft in the mission airspace. Telephonically, the S2 later received an addition to the order from 9 TAC, saying that 1 P-51 with special markings could be in the mission airspace. The S2 ensured the pilots flying the mission knew that addition. The afternoon of March 24 was a clear, warm, sub-spring day. The mission was routine until 5:05 p.m. As written in the 36th Group's Blue Flight Leader's statement, the Mosquito approached our fighter formation from 11 o'clock. It was very close and passed by and under me and to the left with its nose down. I thought I saw a German black cross on its side as it flashed by. Maintenance records show the British Mosquito had been retro-equipped with an American radio, but the Mosquito did not identify itself. When I completed my brake to the left, I was above and behind the airplane. It was headed down and in a turn toward the bomber box. The B-26s were moving into close order formation for their bombing run, the formation in which they're the most vulnerable to attack. In the Mosquito's sudden appearance and inappropriate movement toward the bombers, two of the P-47 flight leaders, Blue and Green, viewing the Mosquito from different angles, mistakenly identified a German black cross on its side, and another Blue flight pilot thought the small aircraft was a Messerschmitt. Initially, Blue leader had sent two of his P-47s down to verify the Mosquito was an enemy aircraft, but when Green leader stated over the radio that he also saw the German black cross on the small aircraft, Blue leader then authorized his P-47s to attack the Mosquito immediately to protect the bombers. The Mosquito was being escorted by 8 American P-51s from the 435th Fighter Squadron, 479th Fighter Group, 8th Air Force, but not in close formation. Neither the Mosquito nor the P-51s had identified themselves to the P-47s when they entered the bomber's airspace. When the two Blue flight P-47s began attacking the Mosquito pilot yelled to the P-51s that he was being attacked. At that point, two P-51s flew down to the Mosquito's rescue, but it was too late. The Mosquito had both engines overwhelmed by heavy fire and was burning and spiraling toward the ground. The Green leader stated that the two P-51s passing above him seemed to be chasing the twin-engine ship, under R/T, radio/teletype, from 9TAC headquarters. The two P-51 pilots were ordered to fly back to our base to file written reports with the P-47 pilots and group staff. After the pilots landed at Le Coulet, we had not yet closed on Aachen at that point. There were rumors that a RAF VIP was neutralized on board the Mosquito. 8 P-51 fighters did seem an excessive number of escort planes for one small Mosquito. But details about the downed Allied airplane, its mission, and people on board were immediately classified. My higher headquarters also was in chaos after the incident, demanding more information every half hour on the half hour. The intensity of their demands was counterproductive to my sorting out what had happened. Headquarters even threatened to court-martial my pilots, but that would have been purely for show because the pilots wouldn't be convicted under the circumstances. In 1985, my son, Russell, researched the March 24, 1945 incident at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., under the Freedom of Information Act. All we could learn were the names of the pilot and navigator of the Mosquito Mark 16 NS-711, who were American lieutenants from the 25th Bombardment Group, Reconnaissance. On an operational mission of an unknown nature flown with another command, and reported missing in action, on March 24 after being attacked by friendly fire with both engines overwhelmed by heavy fire, the pilot was later verified as neutralized, according to the 25th Group Reccie's official history for March 1945. The report stated one unidentified person was seen to parachute from the Mosquito before it crashed. Later, we were able to get a copy of the Missing Air Crew Report, MACR. Related to the incident. The navigator had a note beside his name, RTD, which stood for Return to Duty. He was the one who parachuted out of the airplane before it crashed. We never found out what the Mosquito's mission was in the sky with our bomber formation. During the combat phase prior to the incident, we were fighting over Germany's fatherland, so the Germans had stiffened, and the war had heated up. With the little airpower they had left, the Germans fought fiercely. So how hot was the 36th Fighter Group's war zone at the time? Hotter than any other group in the 9TAC. Ending a March 31, 1945 9TAC official report, total number of sorties per group of the 9TAC for March 1945, 36 Group, 2,499. The 36th Group was listed first with 518 more sorties than the next closest of the 9TAC's 5 fighter groups. Our group previously had earned the nickname, the Fightin' 36th. In 1985, my son, Russell, researched the March 24, 1945 incident at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., under the Freedom of Information Act. All we could learn were the names of the pilot and navigator of the Mosquito Mark 16 NS-711, who were American lieutenants from the 25th Bombardment Group, Reconnaissance. On an operational mission of an unknown nature flown with another command, and reported missing in action, on March 24 after being attacked by friendly fire with both engines overwhelmed by heavy fire, the pilot was later verified as neutralized, according to the 25th Group Reccie's official history for March 1945. The report stated one unidentified person was seen to parachute from the Mosquito before it crashed. Later, we were able to get a copy of the Missing Air Crew Report, MACR. Related to the incident. The navigator had a note beside his name, RTD, which stood for Return to Duty. He was the one who parachuted out of the airplane before it crashed. We never found out what the Mosquito's mission was in the sky with our bomber formation. During the combat phase prior to the incident, we were fighting over Germany's fatherland, so the Germans had stiffened, and the war had heated up. With the little air power they had left, the Germans fought fiercely. So how hot was the 36th Fighter Group's war zone at the time? Hotter than any other group in the 9 TAC. Ending a March 31, 1945 9 TAC official report, total number of sorties per group of the 9 TAC for March 1945, 36 Group, 2,499. The 36th Group was listed first with 518 more sorties than the next closest of the 9 TAC's 5 fighter groups. Our group previously had earned the nickname, the Fightin' 36th. Being a fighter-bomber pilot in the 36th Group in the European theater of World War II was dangerous business. According to the report by Headquarters, 36th Fighter Group Historical Data, February 1, 1940 to October 15, 1948, Howard Field, Canal Zone, dated 19 September 1947, the casualty chart for 1945, as of May 8, January 1, May 8, showed 48 pilots, MIA. Missing in action, 25 Kia, lost in battle, and 12 P/W, prisoners of war, a total of 85. The number per squadron in this category were amazingly close, the squadrons having 28, 29, and 28 respectively, 22nd, 23rd, and 53rd Fighter Squadrons. That's 85 pilot/airplane casualties in little more than 4 months for the 36th Fighter Group that maintained about 77 P-47s. The friendly fire incident by my group in World War II haunted me. I'm sure it haunted the blue and green flight leaders and the 2 pilots who shot down the Mosquito as well, especially the replacement pilot. He was a lieutenant, new to the squadron, following orders from his flight leader. I always thought it was a shame that anyone brave and capable enough to become a fighter pilot in the war would have the legacy of eliminating an American pilot in the last 6 weeks of the war. I was glad to learn from the MACR that the navigator parachuted safely out of the burning airplane. The incident was a tragic accident in a high-traffic war zone that resulted in the passed away of an American pilot. Years later, 1984, after I retired in 1962, my son-in-law, U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Jim Hollis, Patty's husband, an instructor at the Command and General Staff College, ran across a brief account of our March 24, 1945 friendly fire incident written for a section of a book illustrating trigger-happy pilots in World War II and sent it to me. My account of the incident is based on my original carbon copy signed statements of the 436th Fighter Group pilots, my group staff, and the 2 P-51 escort pilots plus the official reports of the units involved in the incident. After reading the excerpt from Jim, I quipped in my very best Tennessee talk, corollary the sun never shines up the same old hound dog's ass all the time. Jim, also a Tennessean, responded, corollary 2. Not all general hound dogs are creative, just stumble on one spot in the sun, not all creative colonel hound dogs make general, but such hound dogs learn how to create sunlight in all their spots. Therefore, creative colonel hound dogs should always wear sunscreen on their asses. I countered, I have been retired from the military for more than 20 years now. Could I prevail on you to locate a surplus insertion device, sunscreen, M1, kernel size? The destruction of Germany. In late March 1945, I had an opportunity to reconnoiter on the ground a section of the Rhineland overrun a while back and now occupied by Allied forces. It was an area in a 100-mile radius that my group and other AAF units had worked over for the past 2 months. Every place was smashed. We drove through a fair-sized city about the size of Phoenix, but we only saw 3 natives. Most houses were completely wrecked. From a distance, many walls looked like they were standing more or less intact, but when we got up close, we could see right through where they had burned. They looked more solid because of the piles of wreckage inside. The streets were peopleless and stacked with rubble except for a few roads cleared to get through. In the countryside between towns, we saw a German with a cow hooked up to plow his field. We went to one town much smaller, about the size of Avon Park, Florida. We walked around for a while. The few Germans who still lived there stayed strictly out of our way in their houses, such as they were. All sorts of furniture, fixtures, and timber lay cluttered up in the rooms or piled around. Stacks of broken clutter had been pushed aside into other rooms or outside, covered in mud and water from the rain. I doubt if there was a complete roof in the town. The only place for humans to live was in a room or 2 left on the first floors that could stay relatively dry. The only visible life were lots of skittish cats darting in and out of the wreckage, no dogs, chickens, livestock or any such. The town was so quiet that it was downright ghostly. I'm sure people were still laid to rest in the rubble, but there was no one to dig them out. Wandering around was limited by minefields, marked, and the threat of booby traps in the off-the-beaten paths. If the Germans kept fighting and this happened to all their country, it should be their last war for a long, long time. When our 36th group closed on the Aachen airfield toward the end of March 1945, we were stuck with 2 long plowed fields for our runway that had been chosen by an Allied engineer with more energy than common sense. The field made Panama's worst grass airstrip look like a pilot's dream in comparison. From then on, I expected the group would have trouble staying operational in the spring mud on impromptu airstrips in Germany. In Aachen, we set up in tents surrounded by passed-away German towns. A couple of my guards caught a healthy-looking 30-ish German man wandering around close to our airplanes and marched him around at the point of a gun to me. I had him searched and questioned him. He claimed to be a farmer, or so he said, and we couldn't see anything otherwise. He was concerned about his crop field that we were using as our airfield. I finally sent him on his way after warning him we'd shoot him if he came back. We didn't see him again. But the next day, another farmer came with a horse and started plowing up one of the squadron's living areas. He said he had the authority of the military government to work his land and that where he had plowed was his land. We almost had to butt him with his own horse to get him to leave. We were hard-pressed to keep up with the advancing First Army. We stayed in a half-packed condition for fear of new orders at any moment. On one mission flying out of the Aachen airfield, I almost ran out of gas just getting to and from the fight. Everyone agreed that the more we moved forward, the sooner we'd end this scrap. No sooner had our rear echelon caught up with us in Aachen than we began moving to Y-62 near Koblenz, Germany, on the Rhine. In early April 1945, even the Allies were getting mixed up about who was doing what and where in the fight. We spent much of our flying time trying to be sure we were getting only foe in our sights. Once we caught hell for blasting a German convoy. The convoy ran out of gas, our GIs captured it, and then we came along and smacked up the German trucks. Nobody was hurt. The GIs saw us in the air coming, figured we might not know about the last-minute capture of the convoy, and got away from it. About that time, I talked to an English-speaking Luftwaffe colonel, one of our prisoners of war. He had been caught flat-footed by American pilots who did a number on his airfield in the fiercest job of strafing he'd ever seen. They destroyed 40 of his airplanes and didn't leave a single plane able to fly. I gathered that was okay because his mission that day was to knock out one of the bridges over the Rhine River protected by the Allies. He and his fighters had no real chance of getting through the Allies to do the job and no chance of staying alive if he returned to the Nazis with the bridge still intact. He seemed happy to be our prisoner. Fanatical Nazis were getting rare as hen's teeth. Everyone claimed to be very peaceful with no desire to harm anyone. That, I supposed, would last as long as the Germans were frightened. Or maybe they wanted us to move across Germany instead of the Russians, who tended to be harder on the Germans. On April 2, as we were moving into Koblenz airfield, one of my pilots returned from being a prisoner in Germany with quite a story. He was shot down 10 days earlier, captured by the Germans, treated okay, and walked all over the countryside, under guard, trying to avoid the threatening American columns. A collection of 12 Allied pilot prisoners carried the guards' guns for them and slept together with them at night. The Germans scrounged food for themselves and the prisoners from farmers in the area and finally left the pilots in a barn to wait for the advancing American troops. The pilots stayed in the barn for a spell, and, getting hungry, walked into town. The roads were full of German soldiers, not in any semblance of order, and civilians moving in all directions, most of them walking. One of the pilots spoke German and talked to several Germans during their trek. Most natives considered the war kaput, finished, and either were trying to stay out of the Allies' way or get home. The American pilots were strafed by Allied airplanes and sat through a heavy Allied bombing in a shelter along with a few hundred Germans. The only time the Germans around them appeared highly disapproving was the mention of Jabos, short for Jagdbomber, German for fighter bomber or ground offensive aircraft. The pilots learned quickly to claim to be Fortress bomber pilots, B-17 Flying Fortress, to keep from getting their throats cut. When the pilots got to the town, they talked to a German major in charge and demanded food and beds, or else when the American army arrived. The captured pilots got both. After several days, when the Americans didn't arrive, the major loaned them a car and gave them gas to go find the American troops, who then came back and captured the town, officially. I detailed the pilot's remarkable experience in a letter to Caroline the same day the pilot returned. Through the end of March and until April 5, I moved the 36th Fighter Group to its new base deep in Germany near Koblenz, HQ, 36 Fighter Group, APO number 595, New York, New York. Our group continued to fly around much of Germany, beating up trucks and trains with little fight from La Boche. The Germans shot anti-aircraft fire at us only twice, but their ack gunners were poor types who were way off the mark. We had a few planes damaged, but it was a drop in the combat bucket compared to past experiences. See Annex 9 for the Command and Staff Officers, 36th Fighter Group, April 1945, on page 131. On April 5, 1945, after relief of my command, I was assigned to a unit near Paris, France. But my former commander in the 6th TAC, General Nugent, summarily counter-assigned me to his TAC headquarters deep in Nazi Germany at Brunswick for the remainder of the war in Europe. I was reassigned just before I was supposed to report to the Paris unit and wondered if I had been listed as absent without leave, AWOL, a deserter in a war zone, an offense that was punishable by death. No MPs came looking for me.